Hola, ¿qué tal? Soy Delia, soy profesora de español especializada en AS y A-Level Spanish. Me puedes encontrar en Facebook, donde publico contenido exclusivo para AS y A-Level Spanish. También me puedes encontrar en Instagram y, lógicamente, en YouTube. Si quieres, puedes visitar mi página web, SpanishNoPanic.com, o escríbeme un email, tanto si quieres empezar clases desde la base, desde principiante hasta universitario, pasando por AS y A-Level. Me puedes escribir a delia@SpanishNoPanic.com. Y hoy te traigo un vídeo, a ver si adivinas el título o de qué trata. Efectivamente, es un vídeo sobre el Camino de Santiago. El Camino de Santiago es parte de tu temario de AS y A-Level, forma parte del patrimonio español, de la identidad de los españoles, y mucha gente piensa que solo hay un solo Camino de Santiago. Hay muchos, como puedes ver en el mapa, hay muchos caminos de Santiago, dependiendo de la ruta que tomes. Incluso en Canarias hay un camino de Santiago que comienza en Santiago del Teide, en el norte de Tenerife, y termina en Gran Canaria, o al contrario. Y otro camino, el camino portugués, o el camino de la Ruta de la Plata, o el camino francés. Todos conducen a Santiago de Compostela, que es donde está enterrado Santiago, el apóstol Santiago. Es una ciudad extraordinaria, patrimonio de la humanidad, que te recomiendo visitar. Y lógicamente te recomiendo hacer el Camino de Santiago en cualquiera de sus variedades. Hoy te traigo un vídeo que no es informativo, no es un resumen como un documental. Es un vídeo de la mano de mi alumno Graham Cook. Graham realizó el Camino de Santiago hace poco tiempo y muy amablemente aceptó una pequeña entrevista donde él da consejos, ideas, opiniones sobre el camino que él hizo. No te digo cuál hizo, tienes que adivinarlo, tienes que saberlo tú. Y Graham, a partir del Camino de Santiago, ha escrito un libro que te recomiendo encarecidamente que compres. Tienes el enlace al final del vídeo y está lleno de anécdotas, lleno de situaciones simpáticas y graciosas, y te gustará mucho. Mi agradecimiento a Graham y espero que lo disfrutes.
We were almost treated like royalty as we went through some of the towns and villages. The local inhabitants always seemed pleased to see people, would wave and say hello. And invariably, if there was any dialogue between us, it tended to be in Spanish. Along the way, a lot of the villagers, I think, are dependent on the Camino to bring a bit of trade. But I've said to you in the past, I mean, one of the reasons I love Spain is I just find the Spanish people very accommodating and very friendly. And it was exactly that all the way along the route of the Camino. I worked in Gibraltar for a number of years when I was around about in my early 30s. And that's when I got to know Spain a lot better. I often used to travel into Spain. And of course, Jane and I have a little apartment in Murcia region. So we've had that for 14 years now. And we want to, it's always been the plan that we'll use the apartment as a base to explore. Last year, we spent a few days up in northern Spain, and it's, in some ways, it's very, very different, particularly the landscape, but in the kind of, what I would call the friendliness of the Spanish themselves is just the same throughout the country. And of course, the history of Spain is marvelous just to explore that. And one of the one of the things we learned from some of our Camino buddies that we made along the way, particularly the Americans and the Australians, they are absolutely bowled over by the history that they meet in Spain, because their own countries are not as old as the history of Spain. This first became apparent to me as we walked into Pamplona, which is a beautiful city with a fantastic arched entrance. And Jane and I were walking in with two Australian ladies, and they were saying, this has been here since the 11th and 12th century, that's twice as old as our country is, and I don't think it had really dawned on me before, but the Americans were very much the same. They are intrigued by the history of Europe, and when you walk the Camino, you're just seeing history every day. It is quite an experience. Almost without exception, everywhere we went, you were received well, treated very well. It was just a pleasure. If you want to go on the Camino for religious reasons, you'll probably get out of it what you want. If you want to go for other reasons, you'll probably get out of it what you want. All in all, I think it's a great experience, irrespective of whether you're devoutly religious or not religious at all.
Exactly. Yeah, we've not said what the Camino is. Can you tell us what the Camino is, and why you decided to put your eyes in such experience?
Sure. Okay. Well, the Camino, effectively, it's there are a variety of historic routes that all end up in Santiago de Compostela, where obviously the remains of Santiago himself, or St. James, are reputed to lie. The historic route from Europe passed through the Pyrenees, and typically where we started our Camino at Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, which is a small French village, a beautiful little village, I have to say, and again, one that I guess exists pretty much solely because of the Camino, in the same way that Lourdes exists because of the miracle that took place there.
Why did you decide to start in France? Wouldn't it be better if you start in Sarriá or near?
Sure. Well, there are various routes and there are various starting points, but the traditional starting point of the 500-mile Camino is in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. Some people start from Pamplona. Some people start from further along in Burgos or Leon. But to go back to your question, kind of what made us want to do it in the first place, the one good thing, in my opinion, that came out of the lockdowns in 2020 due to COVID was that I read a book and found out about the Camino. I'd never heard of it before. And for reasons that I don't really understand myself, it just appealed to me. And I read one book and then I read another. And over the course of a 2-month lockdown, I probably read 4 books about the Camino, all of which were written by people who had done the traditional route, starting at St. Jean. So that's really why we kind of started looking at that particular route. Incidentally, we've enjoyed it so much that we're thinking of doing the Portuguese route next year with some friends of ours, which is about 2 weeks. But despite the fact we've done the 5-week route, Jane and ourselves, and we did say we'd want to do the same route again, we've now changed our minds and we think we might do it again in a couple of years' time.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. That really says a lot.
Well, it does, and the funny thing is, Delia, that we don't really understand why we want to do it.
Oh, how weird!
Yeah, but there's a magic about the Camino, and I just think it's this common sense of purpose, which builds a camaraderie between the people that are doing it, people who from all parts of the world. I think it's just this common purpose that drives you to do it. And of course, people help each other out. And for some people, you know, I think they make friendships for life. In fact, we actually met one couple from the UK where the guy himself, this was his 9th Camino.
Wow.
But he met his wife 2 years ago on the Camino. That's how they met up. Yeah.
My God. And you get bumping into people.
That's right. In fact, from the first night at Orison, Refuge Orison in France, I would say there would be probably 6 or 7 people who we regularly saw all the way to Santiago. There were some people we kind of kept track with just for a week or so. And there was one particular girl who we met on her very first day, and then we didn't see her for another 3 weeks. So it's funny how you do kind of catch up with people. But yeah,
what sort of
every day you're just bumping into people that you recognize and who you may have been having dinner with the night before. It's just a nice environment, a nice experience.
And what sort of conversations did you have with them? Oh, what have you done these last weeks, and things like that?
Well, where are you from? Where did you start from, as in St. John or Pamplona? Where are you going tonight, you know, as in your destination for the night? And a common question was, once you've got to Santiago, are you going to carry on all the way to Finisterre? And certainly at the outset, it was Jane and I, it was our intention to continue beyond Santiago to Finisterre. But after about 3 weeks of walking, we thought once we got to Santiago, that's it. So we're going to save Finisterre for another day.
Which is fine, isn't it? I mean, people going to Finisterre is a bit too much, or maybe a promise.
It's quite a hard 3-day walk, apparently, with not a great deal of accommodation on the way. But most of the people we knew actually, once they got to Santiago, visited Finisterre by bus. So they did a day trip to Finisterre and then back to Santiago. Santiago, incidentally, is a beautiful city. It is absolutely wonderful. Typical for me of the Spanish cities, which is why I love Spain so much. Before we did this, we visited Madrid and Toledo, Barcelona and Granada, places like that. And there's still so much of Spain that we want to see. And fun enough, the best way to see it is to walk it, if not.
That's great. What similarities can you find? The plaza?
Yes, I think in the historic old cities, like Salamanca, where we stayed overnight last year, it's the history and it's the buildings. So the town centres, as you say, tend to have the plazas. I mean, I just love the bars in the city centres, and I have to say that I think my favourite, not my favourite day of the Camino, but my favourite afternoon of the Camino was once we had arrived in Leon, the city of Leon. Again, a beautiful, beautiful city. And we just had a wonderful day, just going on a bar crawl, to be honest, just going from bar to bar. Just wonderful.
It is not, Leon is known for the bars and nice atmosphere.
And it's the capital of the tapas as well.
It is. How about the pinchos in Pamplona?
Pinchos in Pamplona. Jane and I have been to Pamplona 2 or 3 times before, just overnight, and we found Pamplona a little quieter than we expected. I think there's still a hangover from the pandemic. Not everywhere was open. The thing that struck us more than anything is that the bars where we've been there, and the bars are absolutely overflowing with pinchos.
They are.
There weren't quite so many on display, but having said that, we did find 1 or 2 nice bars.
Lovely. And nice beer, nice wine.
Yes, it would be fair to say, Delia, that I have enjoyed my beer on the Camino. The one that I tended to drink more than anything else would be Estela Galicia, in bottles. But the same brewery also do a beer called Camino de Santiago. Oh, and it's a very tasty bottled beer. And so, yeah, I wasn't spoiled. I was spoiled for choice, I should say. There were plenty of decent beers around. Yeah.
Great. Tell me about your routine. Did you get up early? Did you sleep properly? Did you go to bed late?
The routine changed as we went through the 5 weeks. When we first arrived, we were kind of playing it by ear, so to speak. We didn't quite know what to expect. We'd only booked our very first night. We wanted to. We were fortunate that we had time to be flexible in how far we wanted to walk each day. But by the time we were into week 3, a definite routine did appear, and that was starting early in the morning, which was driven by 2 factors. One was the heat, because we were it is amazing how draining walking in the heat is. So we might typically set off at 6:30 to 7 o'clock in the morning, and by the time you stop for breakfast at around about 9 o'clock, then you've covered 9 or 10 kilometers already. So you've kind of really made a big inroad into the day's walking. So that was a factor. If you set off later, certainly for us, we found that the heat would slow you down and really make it difficult to cover some of the longer distances.
Was water an extra weight, or did you buy it on the Camino?
There are plenty of fountains, water drinking fountains to top up along the way. Jane didn't always have hers full because it is quite a weight. We did actually, I did speak to one guy from Holland about halfway through the Camino, and he was telling me how he'd been suffering from blisters, and he decided his rucksack was too heavy. And so he decided to get rid of 5 litres of water.
Oh.
5 litres, I reckon 5 litres of water must have weighed something between 4 to 5 kilos.
Oh my God, that's why
an enormous weight to carry. So
wow, that's why he was obviously making a bigger effort on his feet and his legs. And
well, before we set off, I did weigh my litre chili bottle full of water, and it weighed 1.3 kilos. So I thought, okay, well, I can accommodate 1.3 kilos.
Talking about your rucksack, you were very careful, weren't you, putting exactly the things you thought you would need?
Yes, I was. It's easy to become quite anal about it, in so much as I have to. Well, you've already read the first bit of the book. I did find this kitchen scales, and I became a nerd. Everything that I was taking, I weighed. But there's some days the rucksack seemed to weigh an absolute ton, and other days you just didn't even notice it. After about 4 weeks, we did meet up for a day with my sister and her husband, who were on they've got a little camper van, and they'd been touring around Europe. So we met up with them, and we did take the opportunity to divest ourselves of some of the things that we had in the rucksack, which we now knew that we didn't need. Because having never done this before, you're plagued to start with. Well, what if this happens? What if that? Do I need to take a spare pair of glasses? You know, it's all sorts of things. And the general advice is that if you're asking the what if this happens, don't take it. That's the general advice, just to keep the weight down. But my challenge next time I do it is to have a lighter rucksack, if I can.
So you could have left tops and shorts and things behind. You could definitely. It was a bit of extra weight.
Despite all the advice that I'd received or read about before we left, I still took 1 or 2 things that I thought, just in case. And it's the just in case things you really don't need. you seriously can get by on three lightweight shirts, which means you wear one, you have a clean one for later that evening, and you wash one every day. So you could probably, if the weather is fine, get by with 2 lightweight shirts, 2 lightweight underwear, things like that. But generally speaking, I think people take 3 of everything.
Obviously, every day you'll have to be washing bits and pieces. What if the weather is not so good to put them outside?
Well, I have to tell you, as somebody who hasn't done much washing of clothes in his life, that it's strangely satisfying being in a shower and washing your clothes at the same time. I don't know why. But we did, in the early part of our 5 weeks, we did have a fair bit of rain. And I remember the first night that we arrived wet, we actually had a hotel room with the heating on, and it meant we were able to get everything dry. Had we been in an albergue where you're that much more kind of compromised as far as space is concerned, I think drying the clothes would have been somewhat more problematic. But because we were fortunate enough to be able to stay in hotels a lot of the time, I don't think we ever set off with wet clothes, but we did meet several people who did do, because they weren't in a hotel room, for example. They might have just been in an albergue. But it was a common sight to see people walking with their socks and underwear pinned to the outside of their rucksack, drying in the sunshine.
Oh, really? Oh, I had seen the trainers hanging, but not other clothes.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Oh,
Lots of rucksacks with lots of socks and lots of underwear.
I didn't know that. Your flexibility, the flexibility you talked about, that was good, wasn't it? It allowed you to, like you say, to walk, to dry your clothes, to get a bit of.
It was important for us. I'm sure we'd have survived if we'd have had to rough it a little more, but we chose not to. And the one thing I will say about the albergues is, I hadn't realised this, that a lot of the albergues do offer private rooms, often with shared toilet facilities. But for married couples, it does mean you can have a bit of privacy if you wish. Obviously, it costs a little bit more, but the camaraderie, the best nights we had was actually when we were in the albergues or the hostels, where you would be eating and drinking with fellow peregrinos.
Right. And you feel part of the whole thing.
There were 1 or 2 nights where we just had hotels and we were quite happy to be just by ourselves. But I think particularly if you were walking on your own, you would want to stay in the hostels, really, for the company as much as anything.
Did you find it expensive? A liter of water, a hotel room. Was it reasonable?
We reckon that we averaged about £100 a day, so what, €120 a day, and that would be hotel. And that's for 2 people, so that's hotel and food. And we did treat ourselves from time to time. We would sometimes go for the more expensive hotel option because we didn't like the look of maybe the cheaper hotel option. The best hotel that we stayed in was actually one of the cheapest hotels we stayed in, as it turned out. It was, and in fact, it was so nice we want to go back there.
That's great.
It just depends where you are. In the city centres, we tended to hit all the main cities on a Saturday, so the hotels are more expensive over the weekend than during the week. But we reckon it was about £100 a day we spent. We could have got by on less had we chosen to.
You were talking about the menus. There were sort of different standards.
Most places, certainly the albergues, the hostels, and a lot of the bars and restaurants you would find along the way would offer a pilgrim meal. And sometimes these came with a bit of a choice of starter and main course, or sometimes it was just, this is the pilgrim meal. By and large, I thought they were very good. We came across 1 or 2 average. Funny enough, the least impressive one was just a bit, nothing special really, but we had some meals where pilgrim meals which were really very good. And I think the thing with a 3-course meal, which most pilgrim menu comprise, is that after a long day on the road, you do need to refuel. So we had certainly no problem as far as the pilgrim.
And it didn't matter. It didn't matter.
Yeah, we did treat ourselves to a steak from time to time off the pilgrim meal, but no, we thought that if you wanted to do this on your own and as cheaply as possible, the pilgrim meals really do come into their own. And you won't go short of stuff. You might find it's a little bit samey, the same kind of thing every day, but we had no complaints, no problems at all.
Was it around €5, €10?
Typically, you would be talking about 10 to 12 euros in the albergues and the hostels. If you were in a restaurant or a nice bar that specialised in food, you could be talking anything from 13 to maybe 19 euros for the pilgrim menu.
Oh, not bad. Was it mainly pasta, meat, rice?
Typically, you would have something like a soup starter or a salad starter, and then the main course was always meat of some description.
What sort of
chicken
dessert?
one day. Desserts were it was usually ice cream, something like that, and in fact in some places it would actually be like an iced lolly on a stick, kind of ice cream, but that was fine, no problem. In fact, we did have 1 or 2 pilgrim menu meals where we declined either the starter or the sweet because frankly all we wanted was the 2 courses.
That's right. Oh, you walked the Camino, but there are other ways to do it, aren't there?
There are indeed. Officially recognised ways of getting your Compostela. Either you go by foot, in which case the minimum distance you have to do is around about 100 kilometres. You can also do it by bicycle. And I think the minimum distance you have to cover by bicycle is 200 kilometres. You can also do it by horse, but I couldn't find a horse anywhere, so I had to walk it.
Yes, some people do. Yes. And another thing people do, they send their luggage or rucksack on a van.
That was quite a common factor amongst many of the people we knew.
Didn't you think about that? Was that a possibility?
I've got no problem at all. I think the important thing about the Camino is, if you were to say to anybody, I'm going to walk 100 miles over the next few days, I think most people will say, what? 100 miles? It's a hell of a distance. If you then said, I'm going to send my rucksack on every day, I think they say, well, I don't blame you. So I think the Camino is an individual experience for everyone. And if you choose to do it as we did, which is to walk the whole way with the rucksack on your back, then that's fine. But if you choose to do it a different way, that's, again, is absolutely fine. But no, from my point, we were just absolutely chuffed at the way we wanted. But one stage, fairly early on in our Camino, we thought that might have to had a problem with shin splints, which is a very painful condition that you get down the front on your shins and your legs. And we were seriously having to contemplate whether we would take a taxi to our destination and then we said at the time, well, look, if we can't finish this together, then the Camino's not going anywhere. We can always come back and do it again. So had circumstances dictated, then we may have been forced into doing it differently, or indeed postponing it and trying again at some future stage. But fortunately for us, that didn't happen. But no, I've got no problem with it. It's a bit like people who do the Camino from Sarria. Walking 100 kilometers, that's a long way to walk. It really is.
It is, yes. Apart from blisters and what you've said, any other injured back problems, maybe any other
No, I mean, between us, we only had 3 blisters. I got the first blister after 2.5 weeks, and I was gutted because I wear these little protective sleeves over my little toes, and one of them came off in my sock, and I didn't know it, and so not a problem. And then Jane got a blister which didn't cause her any problems at all, and then I think I got another one later on. But we were very pleased about that. Other than that, obviously Jane had the shin splint problem for a couple of days, but we got through that. And she also did get a bit of an achy back towards the end of the Camino, carrying the rucksack. But I mean, you can get an achy back just sitting on your sofa at home. So it wasn't a reason to not do the walk, right, shall we say. Yeah. We did meet plenty of people that had foot problems, primarily blisters. Strangely enough for us, because by the time we're in our final week, we've kind of walked through everything. Our feet don't ache anymore. There were lots of people struggling from Sarria onwards, but that's because they'd only started in Sarria. It's very easy to overdo it on your first day or two. That's right. And that's when you get your problems. So
I've been told there are, when you get to an albergue, they can massage your feet, and is that?
Yes, there are normally, I say normally, there are facilities around where, shall we say, fairly modest first aid can be given, and some albergues do offer a massage facility. Sometimes the peregrinos will just kind of look after themselves. So if somebody's got achy feet. I must tell you a story. One night, we were about 3 weeks into our Camino, and we stopped at a wonderful little albergue, and we got there fairly early in the afternoon. So it was a nice sunny afternoon. So we sat in their courtyard drinking beer, and 1 or 2 other people came into the courtyard, and we were chatting to them. And there was one guy sat on his own. Now, I didn't realize it at the time, but this was a German guy who didn't speak any English. And it then became apparent that he didn't speak English and we didn't speak German, but it doesn't stop you having a beer together. But the next thing I know is he sidled up to me in his chair, and then he takes his shoe off and he plonks his foot in my lap and waves a blister plaster at me, because he had a blister on the bottom of his foot which he couldn't reach.
Oh no.
So I had to put a Compede blister plaster on his foot, bless him.
Oh.
He was actually, unfortunately, he was having a big problem with his foot, and so whether he managed to complete the Camino, I don't know. But again, just a nice guy, didn't speak a word of English, and yet, you know, you can sit together and drink together and laugh together. Yeah, and the last time we saw him, he was receiving treatment at an albergue where one of the staff there was bathing his foot and then put a lot of antiseptic on. I think the blister had become a bit of a hole in his foot by now. Ooh. So, but he had 5 people around him looking after him, and I bought him a beer because that's what you do, isn't it? So he was okay.
Oh, wow. That's a lovely story. Do you have any
you'll
other...
read about it a little bit later in the book, Delia. So.
Oh, you're giving away a bit too much.
I'm not giving away too much, don't worry.
So you mentioned in your book that you were going to bed every day. It was earlier. You were
earlier and earlier.
Earlier and earlier. Yeah.
Well, so we did manage to snap out of that, because otherwise we would have been going to bed before we got up. But, yes, I mean, I think typically we would be in bed between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock at night. So typically that's what it was, yeah.
Right. Wow. And you got up refreshed and keen to carry on.
There wasn't a single morning where when we woke up we thought, don't really want to do this. Every morning kind of, right, up, let's get, because the good start to the day was very important, as I said earlier, A, to beat the heat, but B, to really get some miles under your belt before you even give too much thought to it. And I think there was one day we set off at about 6:30 in the morning. We only had about, I think we had 16 miles to go. So what, that's about 25 kilometers. And we'd done half of that pretty much by 9:30 in the morning.
Wow, that's good.
So,
That's
yeah.
good. Yeah, yeah. And if you sort of lost motivation, did Jane push you a bit, or
well,
the other
funny
way?
enough, there were only 2 days where I can say that really happened, and they were 2 consecutive days. And the first day, we had a very long descent into a town called Molina Seca, and it was a long distance, and it was very hot, and a lot of the time going downhill is more difficult than going uphill. And this was quite a rocky path going down. And Jane was pretty much, she'd had enough by then, and we still had about another 2 or 3 miles to get to Molina Seca. Yeah. So she did take a bit of cajoling. No, come on, you can do it. But the next day, it was my turn. In the afternoon, we just didn't seem to be getting any closer to our destination, and we had to keep stopping for water. And it was a hard day. Now, the day prior, when Jane struggled, the town we got to was a beautiful town. And in fact, as soon as we got at a nice hotel room, as soon as we got there, we were out, we met up with friends, and you forget that you've had a hard day. But the following day, we got to our hotel and we didn't go out. We were so tired. We just went to the bar downstairs, and that was it.
Right. Do you feel special? Do you feel proud of yourself that you've done all this? Well, or is it something that, okay, it's fine? How do you feel?
Well,
do you feel unique?
It's a good question. It's a good question because I do feel, we feel a great sense of achievement having done this, and we feel that now. But I must tell you that arriving at Santiago and going into the plaza in front of the cathedral, we sat down on the just on the kind of cobbled plaza, as it were, and we lay back against our rucksacks and just looked at the cathedral, and it was just a wonderful feeling of we'd achieved something. Now, in reality, all we've done is walk a long way, but it felt a great achievement.
I bet it was, yes.
A few minutes later, we saw a Dutch guy, a chap called Robert, who we'd seen a couple of weeks earlier, and we had a chat with him, and I took a picture of him, and then I sent it to him on WhatsApp on my phone. Now, he then sent us a picture back, which we hadn't been aware he'd taken. And he'd obviously seen us when we arrived at the plaza. And when we were laying down against our rucksacks, looking up at the cathedral, he took a picture of us from behind. And we've now got this picture framed on the wall because it's our favorite picture of the Camino. And it sums up for me, it just reminds me of the sense of achievement.
And you said you're not religious, you're not a practicing Catholic at all, but going into Santiago's cathedral, was it, what sort of feeling did you have?
We attended the pilgrim mass.
Did you?
On the day after we arrived. And I'm not very comfortable in churches, Delia, but we were fortunate enough that at the end of the mass, they swung the Botafumeiro. Now that is a spectacular sight, and it was a perfect way to kind of end the Camino for us. And so, despite the fact I'd had to be in this cathedral for over an hour throughout mass, when I'd rather be out in the sunshine, but it was worth it, really, just for to see the Botafumeiro swing. It was quite something.